Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to Words and Pictures Festival 2021 and to our session on Other Worlds, Sci-Fi, Comics, and Graphic Novels. This is our fifth year doing Words and Pictures and our second doing it online. I am Amy Scott, Program Services Coordinator for the Port Vancouver Regional Libraries, and I'm joined by Laura Meeker from the Vancouver Community Library, who's helping out during this session. I have just a few housekeeping things before I introduce our speakers today. Please keep yourself muted while the authors are speaking. Feel free to put questions in the chat and we'll be monitoring those and asking them as appropriate. This is a 2-hour session. The first hour is going to be the authors talking about their work, and then the second will be more of a panel discussion and we'll have a little more freedom to ask questions then. So this morning I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with Curtis Chen, who will be moderating the panel discussion. Once a Silicon Valley software engineer, Curtis now writes stories and runs puzzle games near Portland. He's the author of the Kangaroo series of funny science fiction spy thrillers and has written for the Realm Originals 9-Step Station Machina and the forthcoming Echo Park 2060. Curtis's short stories have appeared in Playboy Magazine, Daily Science Fiction, Oregon Reads Aloud, and elsewhere. And his homebrew cat feeding robot is displayed at the Worlds Beyond Here exhibit in the Seattle's Wing Luke Museum. We're also pleased to welcome Sloane Leong who is a cartoonist, writer, and artist of Hawaiian, Chinese, Mexican, Native American, and European ancestries. She has written and drawn 2 acclaimed graphic novels, Prism, Stalker, and A Map to the Sun, and has short fiction credits with Fireside Magazine, Dark Matter Magazine, and Entropy Magazine. She lives near Portland. Also joining us is Heather Finley, a freelance comic writer based in Vancouver, Washington. She is best known for Zombies versus Cheerleaders, and when not writing, Heather is surrounded by cats and foster kittens while dreaming about climbing Mount Everest. We also welcome Tony Parker, a multiple Eisner-nominated illustrator who has done both licensed and creator-owned work. He's a former college professor and says he will give hugs when we're through all of this. We also have representatives from Oni Press, a premier comic book and graphic novel publisher in Portland, Oregon. Established in 1997, Oni Press's curated line includes a variety of award-winning original and licensed comic books and graphic novels, including Adult Swim's Rick and Morty, Nickelodeon's Invader Zim, Scott Pilgrim, Queen Anne Country, and many more. So we will now get started. Thank you all again for being here, and I'd like to turn it over to Curtis to get us started. Thanks for being here, Curtis.
Okay, thank you, Amy, and thank you all for being here. We didn't get an intro for Jeff Parker. Jeff, would you like to say a couple words about yourself real quick?
Hey, I'm Jeff. I'm in Portland, Oregon. Even though I'm in a hotel in Tacoma at the moment, I do a lot of freelance work. But I also do original graphic novels as well, and I'll be talking about the GNs I have with Oni today. But most people probably know me from working on things like the Hulk, X-Men First Class, Future Quest, Aquaman, things like that. And but I'm trying to shift over so they'll know more about things that I actually created originally.
All right, awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you all. Yeah, so this first hour, we've invited everyone to present or just say a few words about the kind of stuff you've worked on, partly so the audience can get more familiar with your work, but also if you want to share any background on how you got into comics, or if you do comics in addition to other kinds of work, how that kind of compares. We'll get into that in the discussion too. And I don't know if anyone is prepared to go first, or if I should just call on someone here. Going once, going twice. Okay.
No, I can go first.
Tony, okay.
Yeah, no,
awesome.
it's
Go for it.
so is this where just a little bit about us, or like the 15 minutes about what we're like our little special thing.
Yeah, maybe more like 10 minutes since there
10 minutes?
are five of
Yeah,
us here.
no worries.
Yeah,
No,
and if you wanted to do a screen share, I think that's
yeah,
available too.
I
But
don't
yeah,
have screen share set up right now because I would only find a way to mess it up.
yeah, no
So,
problem.
but I do appreciate that. We'll start with me. I'm an illustrator, just starting. I'm actually writing my first creator-owned book right now, but I draw stuff, and I've been very lucky to work with a lot of sci-fi fantasy stuff. My first and probably one of my big was drawing the word-for-word adaptation of Philip K. Dick's "Do Androids Dream Electric Sheep?" So by the end of that property, every single word except for towards the end, we dropped some of the he says and she says. But beyond that, it was every single word that was in the novel was in the graphic novel. And for those that aren't familiar with that, if you've ever heard of or seen the movie Blade Runner was loosely based off of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, though the actual word Blade Runner never actually exists within the book. It's one of those weird things where we like the feel of androids. We'll kind of take the feel of it and we'll make our own thing. And both are wonderful in their own, so don't take that as a diss on anything else. But I've had a lot of I've been working full-time in comics for more years than I care to admit to. Worked for basically every major company out there, as well as like Verizon, Disney, the Phoenix Suns. I have no idea. I'm lucky enough to be in a position where I could have forgotten about how much I've actually done. But what I was going to talk about was adaptation of licensed properties, particularly science fiction properties, over from their source material over to graphic novels, because there are a lot of them out there, and it's a wonderful way to get more people to exposed to these things. Because some people, most comic adaptations are more highlights or more story points where they may combine character, kind of like the movie, where they combine characters, where they add and they remove different elements to make it a more cohesive flow. And so I've done a lot of those. And I've also done a lot of adaptations for video games. So like for sci-fi video games, if you hear a bird in the background, it's my bird Angie. She's amazing, but she loves being the center of attention. So I do apologize about any background noise with that. I'll be off on mute when I'm not talking. But I'm really well known for, not, I won't say well known, but I've built a lot of my career about doing these adaptations. And the first thing, if you ever want to do something like this or going to do something like that, or in the opportunity to do something like that on the writer or the author side, is remember that you're playing in their sandbox. And these people dedicate their whole lives to, or at least good chunks of their lives to these properties. So when you come in, you want to treat it with that respect. Joe Casey made a great comment about, I believe it was Joe Casey, about when you write Superman, you don't redo everything. You tailor the suit to fit whatever story you're telling. And it's the same thing goes with when you're adapting a book or a video game or a movie to graphic novel form. You acknowledge that you can't do you can't do an exact translation, even though I did that with Boom, but there's still, you make adaptations, you make modifications to it to fit that medium. You can't just have a one camera sit in the back like you're watching a stage when you're, even with a word for word adaptation. You've got to make it interesting, you've got to bring something new to it. So therefore with Androids, while we did have a word for word adaptation, we had to make sure that it was something new and something different and something dynamic and something that could bring in the audience. And so therefore with that, it was making sure that we worked with the estate of Philip K. Dick, that we worked very closely with them, and they were absolutely amazing to work with, because there are some properties that I'm not going to say here, not that I've worked with, but are incredibly difficult to work with because they're very protective of their property, and they've got a very specific vision, but it may not align with what actually works in within the genre or the medium of graphic novels. But so the first thing when you come in is you make sure that you respect the property. You're in there to help it, you have fun, and they're great fun. I had an incredible time working on Androids. I had incredible, I did a lot of the video game adaptations with Dark Horse for the Mass Effect video games. And it's the same thing there, where you go in and you can have your fun in there. But the biggest thing is you want to respect the sandbox you're playing in, not just for the creators, but for also the people that enjoy it. Because you go on to create havoc and chaos, they're not going to enjoy it as well. So the first thing is making sure that you respect the property. The second thing is the research. which for me is a wonderful thing because my research for Mass Effect was I had to dedicate work hours to playing a video game, which is absolutely wonderful. It's like the tough part with it is I had to play all. I mean, I had to play all 3 games, but whatever property I was on, I was always 1 chapter behind. So it's like I would go through, get the script. I'd have to go online and watch playthroughs to get a good feel for what the background and get a feel for that area. Then after it's like that was done, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Go back to playing and be like, every single time it would be right there with what I just played. I can never fully catch up to it because again, you also had deadlines and life. You got to sleep and eat and all those things. But so you go in and you play it, and so you get a good feel for it. And you have to make sure that you nail the visuals perfectly. There can't be the adaptation of, oh, this is a nice armor, but I've got to go do this. Or with with doing a stream of Electric Sheep, oh, this is fun, but I don't like the setting here. I'm going to change it so where I'm going to take this whole scene out and put them in these clothes, or I'm going to change these things. Or like or also with androids, in pre-production, when I was designing everything, because I designed it before I did the book or read the book, just because of deadlines. I'm like, okay, every time I'm going to give them a different tie, or I'm going to do things like that, and then go to the book and realize, oh, this all takes place in basically a 24-hour period of time. There are no clothing changes. So you have to go through and make sure that you respect. Respect. Lost my train of thought, but thank you, Angie. Lost my train of thought there. And respect. Then once you've got all that down, then you get into it. And even within, you can make little homages to different things. Like you can put friends in your book as backup characters, but if you do that, or the visuals, but if you do that, always make sure you get permission, because you're now putting someone else's likeness, not just in a graphic novel, but you're also putting it in a universe that's being held by by the video game companies or by the comic companies. So if they were to go back and make a sequel, you got to make sure that they know that, okay, I'm putting your likeness in here. I love it. But if they do things in the future, your likeness may be there as well. So you have to be very respectful about those things. And then after that, it's getting in and doing it, which is incredibly fun. I spent about 1.5 years of my life drawing Mass Effect, which is as fun as it sounds. I spent 23 months doing 24 issues of androids. And for all these, I do both pencils, inks, and with androids, second half, I was doing pencils, inks, and ink wash on a 28-day schedule, 22 pages, which is a lot. And so you have to make sure that you balance that out, as well as making sure that you have an art style that fits with what you're working with. While not fantasy, I also did I did a lot of the God of War 4 work. So I did 2 trades with that. And with them, since they're doing a lot of motion comics, I had to modify my style to make sure that it did fit in with the motion comic as well. Whereas it was a very open, very loose way, so that when the digital animators went in to create the motion comic, they weren't constrained by having a lot of heavy line work they had to work with. And then with that, it's really a lot of fun. I absolutely love being able to do what I do with that. But a lot of it's going back and forth. Whatever you do, I think making sure that the you're keeping high communication with the editor at all times, because they're the point of contact. If you're wanting to do something like this yourself, make sure you have one point of contact with, say, Sony, with Santa Monica Studios, with all those things, because if you have multiple points of contact, it gets really confusing really quick. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for all editorial with this. But in the end, I think I'm running out of time. It's just a lot of fun to do, because think about a job where in the job, you get to play video games. You get to draw those video game characters you love to play. You get to put yourself in there. I am both part of Android Stream of Electric Sheep, and I'm part of the Mass Effect Mythos now. So that's gonna be a lot of fun. And then after that, you can go and you can play the game afterwards. But you also have to be careful of burnout. But in many ways, they're dream jobs. I absolutely love doing them. I love working with them, and I'm very happy every time I have an opportunity to do things like this. I mean, I do my own. I've got 2 creator-owned books I've worked on, Mayday and This Damn Band. I've got my own, which I can't announce yet, but it is so much fun to be able to play in these universes of things you love doing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later on among either panel members or from anyone in the chat.
Okay, Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. That was
Thank you.
really cool to hear about. Yeah, but all those projects sound like a ton of fun to work on.
They are.
And
They
I think
are.
we'll probably get into talking about the work of adaptation versus original
Yeah.
in the second hour.
Wonderful.
But if people have questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I will keep track of them. Tony's website is tonyparkerart.com. He's also on Instagram as Tony Parker Art.
Tony Parker Art 1.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's someone beat me there. It's
Oh.
I have an incredibly common name. So it's
the
I'm kind of an
internet,
internet ninja. So it's
All right.
I'm the Tony Parker that doesn't cheat on his wife.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Yep.
Sunday morning shade. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, it's an honesty.
All right, here we go. Okay, so does someone want to volunteer to go next and present, say a few words about their work, or should I just pick someone? Going once, going twice. I saw movement in Heather's window, so Heather, you good to go?
I can jump in.
Okay, yeah,
Sure,
go for it.
Sure. I'll jump in. So I have been in comics. I was just looking it up because I'm like, oh, it hasn't been that long. And then I was looking up this morning and I'm like, oh, it's been almost 10 years since my first comic came out. So I didn't realize how long I've been in it. So that's exciting. I mostly do freelance. I've been lucky to work with companies like Cinescope, with Fivefinity, and then with Aspen, which has been my very favorite. That's usually on a normal year. I'm at conventions across the country with them. It's just been so much fun. Yeah, a lot of random. I usually do a lot of scary horror type comics is my bread and butter that I prefer being in, but branching off into sci-fi whenever I can and fantasy has been fun on the side. The pandemic has kind of changed a lot on my writing side, because being just a freelance writer, usually it's conventions that I'm talking to people, getting ideas, that kind of stuff. So this last couple years, multiple projects that I was working on were just canceled, taken off the books indefinitely. There was kind of that period of, okay, what now? And this last year, I've gotten into some new and interesting that I haven't done before. I've jumped a little bit into editing. I've gone into a lot of my older stuff is getting republished on Kickstarter, which is also fun to see, but there's also that cringe factor of, oh, I wrote that 7 years ago when I didn't know anything about how to tell a story overall. Like, ooh, hopefully don't judge those ones too harshly. One of the Kickstarter ones that I am really proud of is I did work with Big Dog Inc. on Antoinette, and I dropped a couple copies off at the Vintage Books this year. And I got to write a little kitty cat story that was a backup historical fiction, and that was super fun getting to play around in an actual real world, which is what I usually don't get to do, or zombies, you know, you're going too over the top, but just getting to write pretty cats and pretty castles and stuff was very different and fun. Got to work with Miai, who is just a beautiful, amazing artist. Yeah, besides that, as I mentioned, there's kittens. These kittens are all named after X-Men, so I get to get my nerd factor in that way. This is Gambit. And yeah, I think I talked really fast. I don't know.
Yeah, no worries. If I can ask you a quick question, since you're on the writing side of the equation for comics, and so you are. I haven't worked in comics myself, but I believe the usual process is that the writer completes a script and then that goes to the artist, and the collaboration can work differently depending on the people involved. And is Heather frozen for anyone else, or is it just me? Okay.
Nope, she's
Cutting
frozen.
out a little on my
Nope.
Yeah, she's been
side.
cutting out and lagging, so it's not just you.
Okay. Nope. Oh. You there? Okay, you're muted now, Heather.
Okay, am I back on now?
Yep, you're back. Sorry. Did you hear any of what I was saying just now?
Was it about scripting?
Yeah, I was just wondering about
Okay.
what is a typical collaboration process with you, since you are purely on the writing side, I believe, and then you work with artists to produce the final comic or graphic novel.
Yeah, so I'm doing the scripting. A lot of what I do, since I'm writing for companies, is a lot of times they're bringing a story where it's like an established character. Like I did executive assistant Orchid with Tony as my artist. And I knew that it had to be like, here was her past, here's where they were going with the story. How do we add in this factor? So I got to my own story within that, which is fun. But sometimes you also get a lot of like beats, like the most recent story that I worked on, which will hopefully be a Kickstarter. It was like he kind of had every page figured out, but he didn't know how to write the script within it. So I got to, it was really bringing someone else's to life, which was interesting. But then with like Zombie versus Cheerleaders that I've worked on for almost 10 years, that's just totally coming up with my own thing. I've just got, it needs a zombie, it needs a cheerleader, go crazy, do what you want, which is super fun. And I think that's what a lot of writers, you know, yes, it's fun to work on properties you love, but getting to just totally go crazy and do what you want is the, you know, best.
Yeah, so if I can ask you about zombies versus cheerleaders, since you mentioned it, that is your own original concept. Is that correct?
It is not. It was, I think they were about 5 issues in when I jumped in. They did come out before Lollipop Chainsaw. I get that question all the time if it was based on that video game. And it is not, even though I love that comic with Hack Slash, which is one of my all-time favorites.
Oh yeah.
And I just started chatting, started talking about how I had graduated from college with a writing degree, and then submitted a story. So
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so I mean, we've still got like, I was gonna say you've still got a couple minutes on your allotted time. If you just want to show us kittens for 2 minutes, I'm sure we're all fine with that. But
yes,
you did mention you've been working in comics for about a decade. Were you doing other kinds of writing before that, or have you been doing other kinds of writing at the same time?
It's speckled in. I went to college to be a writer, so I still stand by that it's, if you're going to get into a career in writing and stuff, that it does really help to have that, degree background in the long run. I would love to get more into novel writing, is something I always kind of did along the lines, but I think the pandemic has more inspired me to try out film writing, which is new, but also similar to comic books. So that's really fun to be a writer and to be able to like try out different things.
Yeah, totally.
You're cutting out again.
I did have. God, I know. Okay, so having asked about the education, did you get a degree in creative writing, or was it another kind of like writing degree?
Just an English general writing degree.
Okay.
So, and it was actually during college, we had a representative from Dark Horse come to one of my classes and start talking. And I think that was the initial spark of like, hey, I used to read X-Men comics when I was little and I'm liking Aspen comics. Is that a career to try and get into? So it's cool that just, one little speaker kind of sparked that. And it's why whenever things like this pop up or when I can talk to classes or anything, I just go for it because I'm like, that was that one spark that inspired me. So I hope there's other people, young, trying to decide what to do with things that we can help out for stuff like this.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I don't know if everyone knows, but there's actually a really vibrant comic scene here in Portland with, like you mentioned, Dark Horse and Oni Press, and even just people like independently doing their own thing. So it's really cool. I didn't grow up here, so after having moved here and discovering that, it's been a really cool thing to see. Okay, any final thoughts, Heather? If you're unfrozen. I'm so sorry. Okay. What? Maybe we'll move on and come back to Heather and her kittens a little bit later. Do I have a volunteer to go next, or am I gonna pick someone? Going once.
I can go. I have a presentation because that's just the
Oh,
kind of person I am,
awesome.
because
No, yeah, that'd be great.
PowerPoint is
Michelle.
life.
Yeah, and Michelle, I know you're the associate publisher of Oni Press, but
Correct, yeah.
you are also an artist. Is that correct?
Yeah, so before joining Oni, I had contributed to a licensed comic called Grumpy Cat and Pokey, which is tartar sauce, the cat. And I'm going to apologize now because now that I'm talking, my cat is also going to start talking, so you'll just hear her in the background. So I
Okay.
worked on that. I contributed to Elements Fire, which is an Eisner and Ignatz award-winning anthology. And then I also illustrated a middle grade sci-fi fantasy series called The Underfoot, which is about hamsters and the human apocalypse. So yeah.
Nice. If I can ask real quick about that transition from, an artist to, I guess, an executive at Oni. Like, how has that been for you?
Yeah, it's interesting to kind of see both sides of the coin, I guess. But yeah, it's been really educational. I'm still trying to do some comic stuff, here and there. But yeah, it's been really interesting. I love being able to work with other creators, artists and writers, and just getting to know them from a different perspective, I guess.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Jeff.
Okay. All right. Yeah, if you want to start your presentation.
Sure. Let me see if I can share. Okay.
Okay, I can see. Yep, I see it.
Perfect. So I'm just going to run through this quickly. So, it's taking a second to transition. Hold on. Maybe. There we go. So Oni's been around for about 25 years. We are, of course, Oni Lion Forge now. We merged with Lion Forge in 2019 to just kind of expand our footprint. We specialize in creator-owned comics, so bringing comics that people have thought of in those good brains of theirs and bringing them to life with fantastic illustrations. We also have some licensed comics like Rick and Morty and Vader Zim and Agretzico. And yeah, we also have a board game division to do, board games based off of our books. And then we also have a TV and film side run by Charlie Chu, who is our acting producer. Yeah, so we're, like I said, we're celebrating 25 years. Next year, we were founded by Joe Nasmack, and then a little while later, James Lucas Jones. And then, of course, Lion Forge was founded by David Stewart and Carl Reed out in St. Louis 10 years ago, actually, this year. So we kind of pride ourselves on stories for everyone. Like, we like to bring in a whole, sorry, my cat, a whole slew of stories from creators. Sorry. Most notably, like Scott Pilgrim, the Tea Dragon Society series, Mooncakes, Genderqueer. I could list all of our titles, but I'm not going to do that because that would take a while. So today I just kind of want to do a quick title preview of some books that we have that are sci-fi related. I will be talking about one of Jeff Parker's books later, but I will leave that alone so that he can talk more about it himself. So, sorry, it's taking a second to transition again. Zoom technology is fantastic when it works. When it works. There we go. So I'm going to kind of go from like early reader to adult to kind of transition. So first up is Brobots, which is Bro Robots. It's written by Jay Torres and illustrated by Sean Dove. It's a series of 3 books that are about these friend robots that go around and kind of solve mysteries that are kind of based on fairy tale stories. So this one's all ages. It's real easy. They're super short, like 40 pages each. There are 3 of them. So really good for young readers. Debbie and Pearl Digital Detective is one of my favorite books that's come out in the last couple of years. It's basically it's a sci-fi novel that follows Debbie and Pearl and Digits, but it's really teaching kids the basics of coding. So the first part of the book is like, oh, I found this robot and it just keeps on running into the wall and I don't understand what's happening. And you can see that the code doesn't have like a closed bracket. So it's like, oh, the robot just assumes that it's just going to keep running into the wall. So it's Debian kind of solving mysteries and learning how to code. So it's like a really easy introduction. I say easy, I don't know anything about coding. It's an introduction to coding and in a fun, gorgeously illustrated book. So if any kids in your life are interested in coding, I think this is a great book to kind of get them into it a little bit more. Thank you, Zoom. We will go forward in a second. It's chugging along. Oop. So Saifu is a middle grade book. It's basically about Wax, who's like a young DJ, and he's learning how to mix and I don't know any of the DJ terms, so I'm not going to try and embarrass myself. He's very into music, but basically he scratches the perfect beat and kind of opens up a dimensional portal into another world where he gets to kind of throw down with a couple of different like big bad guys. So that's a middle grade book, very fun, very like music oriented. And this one's by Yuji Mercado, excuse me, who's an illustrator down in California. He's very productive. Like he does comics, he does a podcast, he's working on films now. Like if you get to know Yehudi, he's literally doing something 24/7. I don't know when he sleeps. Space Battle Lunchtime is another one of my favorites. I'm going to say that about almost every book because I am a big fan of a lot of our books. Space Battle Lunchtime is a 3-book series by Natalie Reese, and it's basically like Iron Chef, but in space. So basically, Peony is a baker that gets kind of forced into an intergalactic baking competition where she gets to bake off against a bunch of aliens with a bunch of ingredients she doesn't know. And then she falls in love, which is also very fun. All right. Unplugged and Unpopular is another middle grade book. I think all of the parents will understand that when you say put your phone down, they mean it. So this is basically a story about Erin who is punished for misbehaving and has to put her phone away. And then she finds out that digital devices are being used to kind of brainwash humans so that they don't see the aliens kind of changing the earth and trying to take over the earth. So her and a bunch of the olds, so all the grandparents who don't use phones, run around trying to solve the problem of aliens taking over earth. So if you don't want your kids to be on their phones all the time, this is a good title also. All right. Oh, Zoom. Oh no. There we go. Starbase is a book that came out recently, also for middle grade. The whole premise is, what if your pets were actually saving the universe and you just didn't know? So this is a book about Bandit, who becomes the leader of the Starbase in order to solve mysteries. And he's kind of new at this, and he has to leave his loving home and his loving kid to go off and fight evil Krill. So it's a Star Trek-y kind of story about all of these different animals and pets banding together to save the universe, unknowns by their loving human companions. Next up is Orcs in Space. This is a floppy series that's being collected into a trade that is out now. It's written by a whole slew of really awesome people. So Justin Roiland of Rick and Morty fame, Mike Tanner, Abed Rashad Geith, and then illustrated by Francois Vigneault. It's basically about a Star Trek-like ship that lands on an orc planet. The orcs steal the ship, and then they learn about all of these sci-fi worlds that they've never been to. And they cause complete havoc and chaos anywhere they go. So it's really fun. really, goofy, hijinks with orcs in space. Oh my gosh. So jumping from younger readers to older readers, Letter 44 is one of our longer running sci-fi series. It's basically about a newly elected president who gets a letter. He gets in office and he gets a letter, and it's basically like, hey, so aliens are real, just so you know. Here are all the things that we're doing about it, and it's basically following the political intrigue of knowing that aliens are real and what we're going to do about it, and a stealth mission following a bunch of astronauts going to figure out what's going on. This is a really long running series. I think it was 35 plus issues. So if you like political intrigue outside of what's currently happening in our real world, plus sci-fi, this is a great series. Dryad, another one of my favorite series. I'm just gonna keep saying that. So Dryad is a really cool mix of fantasy and sci-fi. Sorry, that's kind of a spoiler alert, but you start off in a fantasy world following the Glass family, and you find out that there's also a sci-fi world that the mother was part of, and her past kind of comes back to get her. And so it's about her and her family trying to defend themselves, but also learn about the sci-fi world. Written by Curtis Weeb of Rat Queen's fame and illustrated by Justin Barcelo, who is an excellent illustrator. Definitely highly recommended. Last up in the list is Rogue Planet, if you like spooky. Sorry, this is kind of a spooky cover. I know this was supposed to be all ages, but it's basically another space story where a salvage vessel goes to check out this this planet, and kind of bad things happen, as you can tell from the cover. It's written by Colin Bunn, who's excellent horror writer. Annie McDonald and Nick Filardi did the art. It's excellent. It's a 5-issue series, so the trade just came out. If you want to check it out, perfect for October spooky season. Yeah, that's a very, very basic rundown of our current titles, and then some sneak peeks, if Zoom will let me sneak those peeks. There we go. Meteor Man by Mr. Jeff Parker, illustrated by Sandy Jarrell. I'm not going to talk about it too much so that Parker can talk about his stuff later, but we're doing an extended version that's coming out early next year, extended version because there's some new content in this book versus the old edition. Very excited to have that come out. Space Trash by Jen Woodall is another one where it's basically about these young kids who have really crappy jobs on during space colonization. This is Jen Woodall's first comic. We're really, really excited to put this one out in summer of next year. Jen's art is amazing. And then last but not least, if you liked Saifu, guess what? There's another one coming out next year. So Saifu 2 is continuing the story of Wax and what happens after he, spoiler alerts, defeats all the bad guys in the first book. What comes next? So yeah, that was a whole lot of books, a whole lot of talking. This is where you can find us. Oni Press on our website, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for those who use it still. But yeah, that is Oni Press.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we have time for Sloane here, if she's still on. But I wanted to, before we go to Sloane, if she's still here, Sloane, Michelle, if I can ask you to, for people who might not be familiar with the terminology, can you just, you mentioned floppies versus trades.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, so floppies are exactly what you think of when you think of like comics. They're like the 22 to 24 page, comics. They are called floppies because they don't have the hard spine. Yeah, but usually if comics are published in floppy form, they're collected into what is called a trade paperback, and that's basically the book version of all the comics collected all together.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully that makes sense.
All right, so we've still got Sloane and Jeff here. So, Sloane, are you good to go?
Sure. I'll probably just be really brief.
No worries.
I forgot also this was supposed to be child friendly. So
It's all good.
I mean, I can talk. I'll let you know which books are not child friendly. Yeah, I'm Sloane Leong, living in just outside of Portland in Vancouver, Washington right now. I'm a writer, cartoonist, illustrator. My newest work is called Grave and I with TKO Studios. It's about two women with wildly different obsessions and kind of like fixation on each other. One is like this really sweet housekeeper and the other is a serial killer, and their relationship is viewed through the lens of a sentient house. And so that graphic novel will be out November 30th. It's drawn by my friend Anna Bowles, who's incredible. This is her first long form comic work. And yeah, my most well-known work is probably now A Map to the Sun, which is a graphic novel about 5 girls that are kind of forced to join their high school's basketball team. This is kind of like a young adult story, coming of age. That was Eisner nominated this year, which is cool. And I'm also working on the sequel to Prism Stalker, which came out in 2019, the first volume, which is like an indigenous psychedelic sci-fi adventure with like psychic martial arts and a lot of indigenous colonial imperialistic feels. And the sequel to that will be out hopefully next winter. So yeah, that's kind of my body of work. I've also done work in animation as a storyboarder, like on Adventure Time and a couple other Cartoon Network series. And I wrote a novel last year that's on submission, and I'm hoping we'll get picked up by one of my like dream publishers. It's looking good right now, but we'll see. And yeah, I like writing short fiction, a lot of science fiction, science fantasy. That's my jam. So yeah.
Cool. So if I can ask you one question real quick here, since you do writing and you also do the illustrating, when it's something you're coming up with yourself, how do you decide what kind of project it is? Like, is this a novel project, or is this more of a graphic?
Yeah. I think it kind of depends on a couple of things. One is like my actual capabilities as an artist. The novel I wrote last year was like, well, I was just kind of burned out with drawing. I had just come off finishing another comic project and I just wanted to do something different. And so I dove into prose. Mm-hmm. And also like the novel itself is about like giant mechs and aliens. And I'm just like not that into, I do like drawing mechs, I'm just not very good at them. And I don't like drawing like highly technical, like robotics and stuff. That's just not that fun for me. I'm more of an impressionistic artist. I'm like trying to draw mechs in a way that embraces my proclivities and style, but right now I don't have that. So I was like, okay, let's just try it as prose. Also, prose is way faster for me. So yeah, like speed, my drawing capabilities. There's also just some things that I feel, well, I don't know, it's hard. Sometimes I also just want like the quicker gratification of finishing a story, which, you know, with comics, it usually takes a couple years. And so with prose, it's usually cut in half. Like it's kind of always up in the air, but usually prose is faster. And then like when I choose whether or not to collaborate with someone, that also has to do with like their capabilities and their vibe. And I like writing stories that also kind of play to my like collaborators' strengths and interests. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, last but not least, Jeff Parker. no relation to Tony, as far as I know. Jeff, you've been you're muted, but you've written on a lot of different comics, different projects. I believe Underground is coming out in paperback from Oni this year. So yeah, what do you want to say about your work and yourself?
Yeah, I'll get back to Underground in a second because it just came out. I started in the 90s purely drawing comics. I always intended to write them as well, but it's just for people who are trying to find work early on. It's hard to get editors to read your scripts. Everybody finds this out. It was easier, and I'm using easy in a very loose way, to get them to look at my art. Because you can tell in a few pages whether someone can tell a story, and if it's the art style has appeal, and if you know the basics of illustration, setting up a scene. Whereas when someone chunks down, the 30-page manuscript in front of you, it's like they're all pressed for time. They have huge deadlines. It's extremely hard to get them to read it. So I got work first as an artist, working on a lot of just odd work for hire projects here and there. And then in the early aughts, I came out with a graphic novel that I'd been working on in my spare time for years called The Meteor Man. And I published it myself, and it got a lot of attention. And after that, it was a kind of global hopping semi-spy story about someone who could adapt their body to any environment. He could learn languages really fast, things like that. And it was based on, at the time, I was reading a lot of Stephen Jay Gould natural history essays, and still one of my favorite writers on the subject. So I was very much into evolution theory at the time. And I was also reading old violent Trevanian spy novels like The Eiger Sanction. And those kind of slammed together inside to create that. But after that, editors at Marvel called me, and it wasn't even actually because of that, even though my profile was raised by it. It was because an editor had seen a 10-page story I did that was a standalone story. It was just a comedy story about apes fighting in World War II. And I think they had a line called Marvel Adventures coming up, where they wanted to do what's called one and done comics for not necessarily just young readers, but new readers. And they wanted to make sure that you didn't have the continuity thing of hassle of trying to find another comic book to have this comic make sense. It had to have a complete story in the 22 pages. And I think they just thought, well, he did it in 10, surely 22 is more than enough. So I started with that, working on Marvel Adventures Fantastic Four, and then I launched Marvel Adventures Avengers, and ended up working at Marvel for like about 10 years. And then at this point, things flipped over for me, where no one thought of me as an artist anymore, because I was always working with other artists, and I was only known as a writer. And that was fine, because I love working with other artists. It's like being able to pretend I'm doing a different style that I actually can't do in real life, and watch it come to be. And also, I love to crack the code on different collaborators. Like, a lot of artists, they work on things and they get horribly typecast in certain roles. Like somebody says, "Oh, you're the horror guy," or "You're the one who always draws cute stuff," or whatever it is. So I like to kind of try to read between the lines and see what they might else actually be good at and enjoy. But I do always ask them, like, what do you hate to draw? Because I don't want to put you through some suffering pain thing. Like if you can't stand drawing bicycles, I will not write a Tour de France story or something like that. But I love doing collaborations with other artists. I'm launching a thing through Kickstarter right now called Blighter, working with artist Drew Moss. That's essentially the Jungle Book, but if Mowgli teamed up with Shere Khan and they fought monsters. So anyway, skipping ahead, I've done all these superheroes, but whenever I do my original material that is not owned by somebody, when I'm not giving away all my best ideas to media giants, I tend to not do people flying around shooting beams out of their eyes, because it's like that niche is met very well. There's now a whole channel devoted to it, so I don't need to make more of that. Oni just came out with a new edition of the book by me and Steve Lieber, well noted from Wide Out, and let's see, currently one of my favorite things was his role in DC's Jimmy Olsen series. And we did this book, Underground, and it's about two park rangers who are being chased through a cave system in Kentucky by people who want to turn the cave into a show cave, kind of like Mammoth. There's nothing fantastic in the book. We did a ton of research on limestone caves and spelunking, and everything that happens in the book is completely possible. Maybe unlikely that it would all happen in one day the way we have it, but that's why you do books. It's not, we're not here to show you an extremely life you can see all the time. Steve did a brilliant job just going through you have to go through the whole thing of, like, they don't have much light down there. Whenever we go underground, you're only seeing little bits of things all illuminated by their headlamps. Sometimes they throw out a flare or something like that, and then you get to see a little more, but we don't cheat it too much to show you what you wouldn't see underground. And it's a treacherous environment. And the neat thing about the story, the hero of the story is Wesley Fisher. She's the park ranger, but she's also a caver. And she's, in any other story, she would be probably the supporting cast, while the guy who's tagging along with her gets to be the lead. But in fact, he's kind of useless down here, because being small, wiry, and having the knowledge is what's more important. And she understands the cave system way better than anybody else in the story. And it's all about what she knows that keeps them alive during the chase. And they have to go through a lot of scary parts, like a part that's all filled up with water with only a little bit of air above their heads to breathe. And we had a fun time acting that out at the studio. We're members of Helioscope Studios in Portland, Oregon. And we have a wide range. Please look that up online, because I'm going to leave people out if I start trying to list the artists, and then they'll get mad at me, and then it's a whole thing. But anyway, so the nice thing is we also get all our artist friends to pose for us. Steve is constantly calling everybody in. He bribes them with food, and then everyone shows up because they're artists and there's free food. And, everybody gets in great positions. And if you ever have the chance to pose people for your drawings, definitely get an artist to do it. They just pose better. The average people, I'm sorry, this is horrible, but it's just somebody else in your family. You ask them to pose, they tend to do a kind of static sort of pose. Artists always, do it something that makes an interesting silhouette. They know what they need to draw. They make a big expression, because you lose some of the energy sometimes when you're trying to draw it. So you got to go big just to show up and be like what would you consider a normal gesture. So anyway, we have that huge advantage on our side, Steve buying cookies and all the artists posing. The other book that Michelle mentioned, I wish she could throw up the frame from her end, but I don't think Zoom works that way, and I'm on my phone. to show you that Meteor Man cover. A few years ago, Sandy Jarrell and I did this graphic novel Meteor Man through Oni, and they invited us to come back and said, what if we did 20 more pages? Or well, they asked us how much more we could stand, and like, we would really like 20 pages. Oh, thank you, Michelle. There it is.
Nice.
It from the cover. I love this logo. It's by Dylan Todd, expert graphic designer, and the cover is by Sandy Jarrell. The lead of our book, Alden Baylor, is a 16, almost 17-year-old sitting on an old Volvo 240 wagon out in the field where he lives, looking up at the sky, waiting for a meteor shower to start. And the cover kind of gives you the sense of what the story is like. You know, the title looks like an old 50s sci-fi invasion film, and it sounds like a sci-fi invasion film. And that's what's happening, but it's not happening in that manner. Like, aliens are not coming to Earth to try to conquer us. It's more jumping back to the whole thing of evolution. It's more of a natural invasion when a species simply moves into an era and pushes out the other species, which is us. So, and that's what people are grappling with throughout the story. What do the aliens want when in fact they don't really even want? They're just doing what they do. They're like it's just simply like an animal or a plant that has moved in and it's going to spread. And it looks like there's no hope to stop it. But Alden, the teenager, for some reason finds he has some kind of connection to one of the aliens. And to say any more about that spoils some good stuff, so I won't go into it. But again, Sandy and I were extremely happy because we got to add in a few new scenes that we would have done before. But at the time, we were kind of limited. We had what we had to work with. And now we've been able to go big with it. So it's like a director's cut going the other way.
Okay.
And Sandy's art is amazing. The reason Oni had originally approached me like to do a YA graphic novel, you know, they and said nothing beyond that. They just said, we just think you do a nice YA graphic novel. And I said, I'd like to work with Sandy Jarrell because he, for some reason, can depict teenagers in a way that's extremely convincing. I think he remembers being a teenager better than most adults do. And I wish I could show you some of the scenes, like the pool party and the date that are in there, because they ring so true. It's like you don't even care that there isn't an alien in the scene. It's just very engaging to watch something real unfold in a story. It's wonderful. You know, Sloane brought up the thing of how long comics take to make, and graphic novels do take a long time. And one of the reasons I still, do a lot of monthly work for hire stuff is because I can reasonably get something at almost like doing stage versus doing movies, but in media like ours, you can do something and a few months later you get to see people react to it, and it's essentially like a drug. It's really fun, and you get to see what's working. Sometimes you do something you're extremely proud of and people like, that was nice, and then move on. And then other things you weren't thinking was going to be much, they jump all over and you go, oh, okay. And I'm not saying you should focus group your writing or drawing like that, but it's not something you shouldn't pay attention to. It's an interesting thing. Like this past week on Twitter, I'm just Jeff Parker there. I wanted to get out of my system a few cartoon ideas I had about my dog from doing dog walks, and they got really popular. People just kept retweeting them all over the place, and I was just really trying to exercise some ideas so it would be out of my head. And I guess that's also I'm not trying to say that doing comics is therapy, but I'm not saying it's not either.
All right.
But yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
and
thank you, Jeff. Sorry to cut you off. We are past
okay,
the
thank
hour.
God.
So
I was trying to run out the clock for you, Curtis.
No, it's all good. Yeah, this has been really great. Thank you all for sharing. So I think we are going to take a break now until 1/4 past. Is that right, Amy?
Yes, we'll come back at 11:15, and we'll just leave this open so you can
Okay. Yeah.
put yourself on mute and turn off your video for now and go get a drink or whatever, and just come back. We'll start again at 11:15.
Yeah, and if people have questions, feel free to go ahead and drop those in the chat, and we can use those to start the discussion, or I can ask people about random things that come to me. But yeah, thank you so much. We'll be back in 10 minutes.
Back.
Yep. So it's 1/4 past. So
let me do my little introduction again, because I'm not sure if the idea was to cut this up or what, but I will, in case people have not been here from the beginning. We are recording this, as we said. And so I'll say again, welcome to Words and Pictures Festival at our session, the second half of our session, Other Worlds, Sci-Fi, Comics, and Graphic Novels. This is our 5th year of Words and Pictures. We've got Curtis Chen here. I'll do an abbreviated introduction. Curtis Chen, who is a local writer and runs puzzle games. He is the author of a Kangaroo series of funny science fiction spy thrillers, and has written for the Realm Originals 9th Station, Machina or Machina, and the forthcoming Echo Park 2060. Curtis is our panel moderator, and so I will let him do some introductions of the rest of our panel. We are happy to take your questions in the chat, and if you want to turn on your microphone and try to ask a question, please be thoughtful when you do that. Wait for Curtis to ask for questions, and we'll go forward from here. Again, thank you so much, Curtis, for doing this for us.
yeah, thank you, Amy, and all the library folks for putting on this event. This is really cool. Thank you to all of our comics folks for being here and taking some time to share their work with everyone. So real quick to run down who we have here. So we have Sloane Leong, who is a writer and an artist. Full disclosure, Sloane and I worked together on one of those Realm projects, Echo Park 2060, which is coming your way real soon now, any day now. That would be great. She's creator of A Map to the Sun. She was an Eisner finalist this past year, and is a really great book if you haven't seen it. Her latest project, I believe, is Grave and I with TKO, which you mentioned earlier. Good to have you here. Heather Finley is a writer and kitten wrangler. Oh, we've moved, so no kittens anymore.
I moved to a better connection, so less exciting. Now there's just wine behind me.
No, all good. Oh, wine is good too. I approve. Okay. She's written for a few different things, including Zombies versus Cheerleaders. Tony Parker is an artist. He has recently worked on an adaptation of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is the original novel that the movie Blade Runner was based on. And
Correct. It actually came out in 2010 and 2011, but
Okay.
it is. But you're absolutely correct beyond that. The recent part, I'm like, oh, it's some of my earlier work, but
Okay.
I did that. Yes.
My mistake. Sorry.
No worries. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So this discussion is supposed to be about science fiction, which I think we're there already, but I would definitely be curious to hear more about that adaptation process.
Absolutely.
We also have Jeff Parker, no relation as far as I know, who's Underground is out from Oni Press, and he currently has a Kickstarter called Blighter. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so check that out. And we also have Michelle Nguyen from Oni Press. She is the associate publisher. And she, in the last hour, which you can go back and look up, she gave a very nice slideshow of some of their past titles and upcoming titles for all ages. I'm very happy that you mentioned Space Battle Lunchtime, because I love that series. It's so charming. Yeah, so we're here to have a discussion now, and any folks in the audience, if you wanted to throw questions into the chat, I'll be keeping an eye on that. Or if you want to either unmute or turn on your video, just wave at us if you have a question. Please feel free. But I'm going to start out asking, so this is kind of a question for everyone, because Tony mentioned adapting word for word a novel to the graphic format, which I think is sort of one extreme of the spectrum. As I understand it, so I haven't worked in comics myself, but I've talked to other people, and I've seen like comic scripts, which I believe is the usual method of collaboration, is that a script gets written first, and then the writer collaborates with the artist to come up with the final layouts and exactly what is going to go on the page. But first, Tony, I would love to hear about, so adapting that Philip K. Dick novel, which I believe was written in the 60s.
Correct. It was written in 69, I believe. It initially took place in 1997. Then they updated that for, they continue to update that as we approach those times.
Sure. Yeah, and it's been a number of years since I read it, but I do remember it is very, very different than the movie Blade Runner, which more people have probably seen.
Correct.
So what was that process of adaptation like? You said it was very much word for word.
No, it was, and that's, as far as I know, it's only a novel that's been adapted word for word from source material to the adaptation.
Wow.
It took 24 issues to do. And I know something, one of the reasons is because the estate didn't want anything changed. They wanted to make sure they kept as true to since Philip K. Dick's no longer with us, he can't give us his say of like, this is good, this is bad. So out of appropriate stewardship of the property, they felt it was best. And everyone's got different takes with this. Because I've read other adaptations which are looser but still wonderful. But they wanted to make sure to keep it word for word with that. And this is one of those cases where it works because every single thing, it's such a tightly written story that everything is dependent upon each other. So therefore, when they did that adaptation for that one, it was, so I don't know exactly who it was at Boom, but because it was through Boom Studios, they went through and they broke it down to, okay, this chunk is in issue 1, this chunk is issue 2, chunk 3, chunk 4. Then from there, they broke it down to smaller, like this page, to try to make sure it fits with that graphic narrative, which is quite a Herculean effort. And I'm happy that I wasn't the one who had to worry about it too much. Mine was, because usually on this, let me take a step back. There's an old legend about the Marvel method where the writer will say, draw 22 pages about Spider-Man and I'll throw some words in there. And they did do that for a little while to help keep deadlines because it was very much a high volume thing. That really doesn't happen anymore. There can be collaborations, but for the most part, it's here's a script, here's the writer, you can make adaptations to it. We want to pretty much stick close, at least close to the script. And with this one, this was sticking directly to the script, where I could make nuanced things like within my adaptation, I made both Deckard and all the replicants left-handed as an homage to the movies, where it's like, is Deckard a replicant or not? So I could do little nuances like that as like little tips and nods, but for the most part, you've got to stick with with licensed properties, stick with what's in the script, because it's already gone through a vetting process, whether it's this or with like Mass Effect, it was with both Dark Horse and EA BioWare, which is the game company that produced it, as well as Sony. So you have 3 different tiers of approval you had to get through before it gets to me. So when I got it, most I could do is I could like put people's likenesses in there, but I couldn't go through and make any type of drastic changes. Like, what if he says no at this point? Like, no, you don't. It doesn't work. It's someone else's sandbox. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So therefore, it's very. With Androids, it was everything had to be very specifically placed in there. Again, I can make the nuances and the allusions to things.
Right.
But it was that. Go ahead.
Oh, so I was just going to ask. So as an artist, like you were still getting to decide like how things were laid out and depicted. But did that feel more constrained, or were you happy to have those guidelines?
I like those guidelines because it lets me play with more the nuances, more the details. There, because otherwise, if I have to look at the larger story arc, I have to make sure that I'm not screwing myself over further down the road. Where it's like, oh, I'll put this little thing here where he throws this in the trash. And they find out 3 issues later, no, he hates litter. Like, how do I reverse engineer that? Right. So I've got to make sure that all fits in there. So sidetrack off of that, I've actually worked with 2 of the writers on this panel. I've worked with both Heather and I've worked both with Jeff. So I'm like, wait a minute, I know those people from professionals. I know them from work. But it's something where with the adaptations, they've got to be they really have to be constricted because you're playing with someone else's ball. You can't make your own rules when it's their ball. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to jump over to the other Parker, Jeff. Since John mentioned Marvel, and Jeff, I know you've written for a bunch of Marvel titles. Obviously, there you're definitely playing in someone else's sandbox, but they want you to come up with original stories. So for some, for things like the Avengers or for Hulk, like, how constrained were you? Like, were you pitching ideas and they were saying yes or no, or were they saying this has to happen in this next set of issues?
They know. Well, they do that. Luckily, I wasn't involved with a whole lot of those. Here's what we want to happen. A lot of times they would tell me like, we'd like something with this kind of tone, or whatever, and then they do kind of get into orchestrating their entire universe, and it is constricting. That's why a lot of the stuff I did was like Agents of Atlas, where I sort of had my own little corner of the Marvel universe to run around in, and I didn't have to, necessarily always. We would sometimes butt up against the larger storylines going on, but it was more freeing for me. Now the trade-off is like less people read those books. But then it's weird. You do stuff and create it like, we brought back Jimmy Woo, and now you see Randall Park playing him in the Ant-Man movies and on WandaVision and stuff. It's like, this is great. Also, he's perfect casting. But it's like, and then you realize, oh, I'm just R&D for these another media conglomerate. They got me again. And because a lot of times you want to use some other characters that they have, but the way they're the editorial offices are broken up like little fiefdoms. I said that wrong. And they have control over certain groups. So you say something like, I want to use Doctor Strange. Like, no, Doctor Strange is in the Avengers house and blah, blah, blah. And you don't have permission to use him. So you end up, even though I say like, I'm not going to create, things I don't own, characters I don't own for you, but you kind of end up doing it anyway, because like, I've still got to write a year's worth of stories and come out with something next month. And I need to get the artists something early so they have plenty of lead time. So the system itself kind of it's like, the way the house always wins. The system sort of benefits the large publisher. You end up creating stuff for them anyway, simply to get your own book done. And then, if you're lucky, you actually do get compensated if it gets used somewhere else. The big Aquaman movie from a couple of years ago used some stuff from my storyline, particularly all about Aquaman's mom, because she was always dead in the comics, and I thought, what if she weren't dead? I thought she was actually pretty important, and they end up using her. Nicole Kidman plays her in the movie, and I go with my son to watch it, and I kind of can't enjoy it like everybody else, because I'm taking notes on what of my stuff is in there, and then I'm bugging them like, hey, you guys kind of used my stuff, and it's like, yes, legally it's all yours, but and it's like, and then they came around and they compensated me some, and thank God, because I don't know if you heard about this last year. There was this virus thing that went all over the planet and changed the world. So like a lot of projects got put on hold, and thank goodness Aquaman sent me some money in time, because that was kind of scary. But weirdly enough, print comics did better, and that is not what everybody thought was going to happen. This is not really my thing to be talking about, probably, but everybody assumed like, oh, everybody's going to do digital now, which you would assume, still probably will, but it's like for some reason print ordered better than ever, as far as I can tell from sales figures. So I don't know if that's simply because people were home and needed to read something. You know, they burned through everything on TV and were finally ready to go back to reading. But I'm glad.
No, that's great. So let me kick it over to Michelle now, since she currently sits on the publisher side of all this. So I know Oni Press does a lot of creator-owned titles, but you also do a lot of licensed things like Rick and Morty. So when you're managing those kinds of things, like obviously you're working with a third party in addition to whoever's going to be writing and illustrating the comic. Is it up to you as the publisher to sort of manage all that and make sure everyone's getting what they need, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we kind of work as not only the project manager and management of talent, but also like the liaison with, for example, for Rick and Morty, it's WB. So we have a fantastic senior editor named Robert Myers, who does a lot of our license stuff, and basically he'll look for illustrators and writers and say like, hey, we really want to do, for example, we just did a Rick and Morty versus D&D series. It's like, okay, so let's talk to a couple of writers. We'll get a couple of elevator pitches, and then we pass those by the licensor and be like, is this okay? And then they're like, yeah, sure, go for it. Rick and Morty is like, it's wackadoo. It's do whatever you want. It's a wild series. So from there, the writers will flesh out the script, and then we'll have artists attached, and the licensor is part of it. Kind of like what Tony was saying, like they get to oversee everything and make sure that it's okay to be canon, or in Rick and Morty's instance, everything is a different universe. So it's all good. But with licenses like Agretzico, they're very protective of like character designs and staying on model, and making sure that everything looks consistent. Whereas Rick and Morty, we have a little bit more leeway. Like we can kind of go a little bananas with the art style. So it just really depends on the licensor and kind of the properties that they want to keep consistent in between their storylines with, their various media, TV, film, all that other good stuff. And, any other licenses they do with toys, games, etc.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So over to Heather real quick. So you mentioned that you've done a lot of work as a freelancer. So just sort of, generally in terms of the project you've worked on, like how much freedom are you given, or have you felt more constrained at times? Like, have you asked for things from people? Like, can I do this? Can I do that? Or
yeah, I think I've gotten pretty lucky with getting able to do a lot that I have personally pitched. The one that, like, when I work with Aspen on some of their properties, that's been probably the closest I've gotten, where I have to be very aware that those comics have been out for 15 years, and there's this history and there's everything, and it needs to line up. However, being so close with them and having been a bit fan for so long, I find being able to play in those worlds pretty easy. So I've been really fortunate that when I've pitched things, like one of my favorite ones was getting to work on Kara's Magic Death Princess, and Vince said he was so nervous handing his property over to any other writer. He hadn't done it before, and that his little baby. But I had so much fun on that story, and then Tony was able to jump in and do the art and just absolutely kill it on that story.
It was so much fun. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, that's one such a fun one. So I've been fortunate this year with the pandemic, I think is when I've done a little bit more of writing very constricted stories, because I have been just trying to pick up what I can from different people. So there's some momentum going. So I think it's been a good lesson. I've learned a lot this year trying to work with people, trying to get their Kickstarters going where they have an extremely clear vision of what they want from their story. And I have to adapt what I want to do within their world. But yeah, there's always different ways to learn. My favorite is when I get to work one-on-one kind of with artists and they have like character design to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can play off the character design and go back and forth. Those have been my very, very favorite stories to work on. So hopefully some of those will be coming out on Kickstarter and stuff later on.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And Sloane. Oh, sorry, Tony.
I was going to actually just really quick. Sorry, interruption. I was going to reinforce something Michelle said about working with like the IP owners. Is a bit of inside baseball. Every IP owner is different. Like when I did the God of War stuff, they had the last series they had me fight Kratos fighting a giant hippo. And it's a kaiju. I'm like, okay, so I gave it like a 150-foot tall hippo. And it was like, then I came back, look over, was like, is that too big? And they're like, no, go for it. Have fun with it. Whereas I've worked on other properties, like with Warhammer, are very specific on their things. Whereas like that gun is 2 inches too long. I'm like, on the page, the gun only takes an inch and a half on the page. No, to scale is 2 inches too long. So it's like shaving a micron off the outside edge. And again, it's not a diss on Games Workshop or Warhammer. It's just every property is different. Whereas with the Warhammer stuff, by then I did a mini series for them. By then I could tell you how many bolts were on a Hellhound tank from memory. Not because I counted it up once, but because I can go through like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I could do that because it had to be that specific. And like with likenesses with both Mass Effect and the God of War stuff, where that was the biggest thing, is making sure that you nail that likeness, because that's what the fan knows, that's what they know. There can't be any like, oh, I think Kratos' beard is too long, let's trim that thing down, or let's give him this big old Santa beard. It's like, no, it's got a very specific angle to it. But other times, like 100-foot tall hippo, go for it, have fun. So it's just want to piggyback that every licensee has a different feel for what they want from it. So if you're getting into that or wanting to do that or doing that, be prepared for that. Be prepared for the whole spectrum. And I apologize for the interruption there.
Oh, no, it's totally fine. Before we go to Sloane, I just have to ask Jeff what he's doing with that plastic spoon.
Sorry. I was just fooling around, like saying, what kind of effects can I create with what's laying in front of me on the hotel desk?
Okay.
Always experimenting, Curtis.
Good. No, thanks for sharing the life hack. Well, Sloane, I know you have worked on at least one work for hire with a terrible team lead. But have you done other projects where you had to like sort of negotiate with whoever the publisher was or the person who was going to, like the editor, to, you know, sort of adjust to what they wanted in addition to what you were going for?
Trying to think.
I mean, it's fine if you say no. We'll just all hate you for leading such a charmed life.
I mean, most of the license work I do, like when people approach me, they kind of want me for what I bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't do a lot of negotiation in that sense. I think the most restrictive job I had, it wasn't comics, but it was animation.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of have to tailor, well, it was for Adventure Time, and you have to tailor it because there's certain like what is it called, like you can't say things like crap, or, you know, like you have to tailor it for a certain age range, and also like for TV executives, like how they I can't remember what the term is, but you get it. But on my episode, they didn't like that I called this purple soda perp, because I think that was like a reference to like a drug. But anyway, so I had to call it porp, which was fine because I have a friend named Porpentine, so that was fun. But yeah, most of the time people are pretty flexible and hands off with me.
Okay, no, that's great. Um, I had another question, which I will think of in 1 second. If anyone else has something they want to talk about, please go ahead. Yeah, no. So as I keep mentioning, I haven't worked in comics myself, but I'm a big fan. I've been reading them ever since I was very, very young. So it's great to hear from all of you about what it's like to make comics. Yeah, Tony, go for
No,
it.
I was going to say, to help distract you and get back to your question, I've got I've got tremendous amount, always had a tremendous amount of respect for writers. That was doubled even more so now that I'm writing my own thing. Writing is hard. Oh my gosh. But the biggest writing for licensed properties is incredibly difficult because you also have to be careful that you don't write stories that may be coming up in a future game or in a future movie or future TV. Because
Yeah.
as I can't say what it was, but it was from a public interview, but Chris Robertson wrote the God of War stuff. He's like, I've got this great pitch for this, and here we're gonna do this and bring this on. And they said, yeah, that's great. We're doing that in the game. So I love that we just can't allude. In fact, don't reference anything like that. So if you're working in a licensed property, not only have to find something that's interesting and exciting to the audience, is exciting to the creators, is excited to all the people working down the chain, but it's also something that isn't already in process. So it's an incredibly difficult needle to thread, because with some of these properties, you've also got to do something that will fit in canon, but is not relying upon the canon further down. So you can't write, and here's where Kratos lost an arm. And like, this is gonna be difficult for explaining how he gets it back in the game. But it's also something that matters, because one of the toughest part with this is how it's got to matter as well. Like I've been very lucky with both mine. With God of War, it was all canon, and it was like I've drawn the only picture of Kratos' wife in existence. Only representation is that. So that was no pressure on me whatsoever. But sorry, go ahead.
Heather, you had
No, that's so true, because when I tried to get in with Marvel and DC, I was trying to work with an artist, and we were pitching literally everything, and he was already working with them, so we should have had the door, but we kept getting the, there's something on TV coming up we can't talk about. So it was just like pitch after pitch after pitch, that it was like, no, you can't touch that character that hasn't been around for years. Just don't, we can't tell you why. I was like, okay. Like it was a hard thing to try to get through. And yeah, it's trying to plan out future and be aware, and
yeah. So I've just a tremendous amount of respect for because by the time it gets to me, it's like, we got all this stuff, you can have fun with it. But I'm working all this stuff beforehand and making sure you've got the tone of voice that fits with the writers, and whatever the game or the TV show or the movie is incredibly exhausting. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the writers that have to work within that, which is why so many of them, this is fun, I have doing this, it's a great paycheck, but here's my own creator own piece I did right over here. Where you can also have more freedom with it, but you also get more fruits of the labor.
Right. Yeah. So my question for everyone here is, so it sounds like everyone has had the opportunity to work on a bunch of different things throughout their career so far. Like, do you have one, like, not necessarily a favorite, but something that stands out in terms of like you were really glad you got to work on that, whether it was a work for hire licensing or like your original project that you were able to do because of other stuff you'd done? Anyone?
I'll lead off. Well, it's one of those things, you might get this price among everyone, they're all your babies in a way, where you've put emotional effort into them. I mean, there's always a project where this is a paycheck. But if you're good at this, you find something about that paycheck to love. Or not the paycheck, because that's yay, food and roof, but that property to love. Freudian slip on my behalf there. But it's you always find that nugget you hold on to, and so every one of the projects is great. But right now, to the second part, something you're proud of is I've got an upcoming, my first writing project ever is actually greenlit and approved by a company. So I've already got, and it's I can't say anything beyond that, but it turned into, here's an 8-page story that I put all my money into. I did it and had fun with it, and I approached a company that I've got a really good working relationship with and said, hey, does this fit anything within your upcoming stuff. Could I develop this into something? And within 2 weeks, it turned into, yeah, here's how's this for an advance? And we want this for a story.
Wow.
What? This is my first time ever writing anything. But because of this parent strength off of that 8-page pitch, whereas I wrote, colored, penciled, inked, ink wash, all that stuff, because of the strength of that, they're like, we love this, we love the concept, we love the pitch enough that we want to put you on a production onto our publishing schedule.
Nice.
So hopefully around 2023, I'll be able to talk about it.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's my little how have I failed upward to this? And I'm going to do what I mean, and I'm going to fight for every tooth and nail, but that's my little ego pride thing, is how this happened.
Yeah. No, that's great. Who else wants to share something like that?
I think for me, one of the most exciting things is having read comics for so long. Whenever I get to work with an artist, or a lot of times like cover artist that I've respected and, bought their stuff for so long, that's been one of the most exciting things for me. I remember when Executive Assistant came out, they brought back a cover that Joe Benitez had done. And it just blew my mind that it was like, my comic has a Joe Benitez cover on it. So it's moments like that have been the big ones for me so far.
I do that too, where it's like, I gotta think Sienkiewicz is doing a cover of my book. I still get giddy over that. So you're not alone.
Colored by Peter Steigerwald.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool. Jeff or Sloane, anything come to mind? Or Michelle, something you've gotten to work on?
One of the things I really enjoyed, and we're trying to figure out a way to bring it back. Tom Fowler, a Canadian artist, this tall Sasquatch of a guy. And I did a comic called Mysterious the Unfathomable years ago. And it was like the last thing that Wildstorm published before they closed that imprint at DC. And I don't think a lot of people got to read it because it wasn't the thing. And this is a real problem. You can put something out that you're really proud of and you worked hard on. But if you put it out where people aren't looking for it, that's not where they expect to find such a thing, then you're essentially out shouting in the void, somewhat. But at the same time, you've created it and there's no reason not to bring it back and do more. Tom and I have discussed doing some new stories, and also one thing I've wanted to do ever since in college, I'd put on some radio plays. And I would like to do an audio story too, and get some voice actors together and do the whole thing purely like that, because I love the theater of the mind. I know it's completely the wrong direction here when we're talking about visual media, but you got to remember also, if you want to stay afloat doing this kind of work, you are a storyteller. Mm-hmm. You are not specific to any particular media or anything. It's like your skills can be applied to all kinds of things, and you can be flexible and still do what you do just by learning some new tricks and expanding a little bit. So don't limit yourself thinking, oh no, I only do this one thing. It's because that's not who you are really. Mm-hmm. But when you're a creator, you can just create.
Yeah, no, that's a great advice. Is that advice? I don't know.
It's sort of. Yeah. It's vague advice.
Yeah, and I will second the recommendation. I guess it's a self-recommendation for Mysterious, which I have read and enjoyed a lot. To be fair,
it was about a magician. He appears as a stage magician, but he actually does real magic. He just hides in plain sight. And you find out in the world, that's what a lot of them do. There really are sorcerers or wizards, but they present themselves as David Copperfield or David Blaine. I don't know why they're all named David. And in the story, he gets a new assistant, and she works for like an independent newspaper and is doing a story on him because he's conducting a seance, and ends up kind of going along in a sort of he's a pretty selfish character who doesn't particularly think of doing good in the world, and she sort of forces him to if not be better, at least affect change in a positive way, because she's the conscience. It's almost like a magical Doctor Who, but the companion has a much larger role than usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
no,
she's learning magic.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. Sloane or Michelle, thoughts on like cool stuff you've gotten to work on, or interesting stuff in terms of, you know, what you did on the project?
I'll just say that working in comics still feels like a dream. I get starstruck really easily, so a lot of the times it's like, oh, you get to talk to so and so, and you get to email them and talk to them about a project. I'm like, really? So it's I'm so lucky to be able to work in comics because it's something I've wanted to do my entire life, and just being able to talk to creators and know that it's not just this weird parasocial, Twitter relationship anymore. It's like, oh, I actually get to talk to these people, and they're real people. There's normal people just making comics, and that's just the coolest thing to me.
Yeah, awesome. Sloane, any thoughts?
It's hard to nail down just one thing. I mean, I feel like I live a pretty charmed life. Like I published my first comic when I was 16 through a now defunct publisher.
Shut up. You can leave.
Yeah. And yeah, I've always just wanted to write and draw my own stories, and I can do that now. And I do it all the time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I did want to circle back to so I know you mentioned A Map to the Sun, which is like set in high school, and Jeff has also talked about doing YA targeted stories, and I know Michelle mentioned a bunch of YA stuff, or all age ranges in the slideshow earlier. Do you have thoughts on like how you approach those kinds of stories versus something that you might think is more for a grown-up audience?
That was kind of difficult because I don't know, as a younger person, I was reading adult work. I never read stuff that was marketed towards teens or like, so I don't know. I didn't grow up with that differential in mind. So when I was drawing A Map to the Sun, I was just trying to tell the story as honestly as I could. And there's a lot of stuff in there that wouldn't fly with a lot of schools and libraries and parents, as I found out as they emailed me. One thing that really made them mad was the like there's like literally like 2 pages of the teen characters like smoking, and that really angered a lot of people, which is funny because there's also like a teacher-student relationship, which is extremely dark and sad. I don't get a lot of feedback on that. There's also a lot of like family, like physical abuse, and it was the smoking that really set people off. I don't know why. But yeah, there's some elements that I tried not to draw in a way that was like super, I don't want to say indulgent, but I didn't want to be super graphic. That's about the only thing I think about when I'm drawing for a younger audience, but otherwise I remain pretty staunch in sharing and writing stories that are pretty unfiltered, even if it's for a younger reader.
Yeah, totally. If I can throw this over to Michelle, because as a publisher, I feel like you probably have to deal more with like, where in our lines does this go? Like, who do you market this to? Like, how does that, like when someone comes to you with a project, do they already have in mind like this is for kids or adults, or how does that work?
And most of the time people do come and they're like, this book is for middle grade, which is like 8 to 12, or young adult, which is, like 13 plus, or new adult, which is a new thing where it's like literally, 18 to 24. I don't know. They're still figuring it out. But most of the time, writers or creators will come and be like, this is for a specific age group or all ages. And then usually what we do is we try and figure out as the book is being created, how to market it to libraries and teachers. And we do like reading guides and sensitivity reads, or if possible, we get teachers involved in the script, kind of as a guidance to make sure that we're hitting a lot of the points that they want to see in books. So like right now, a lot of teachers and librarians are asking for more emotional social intelligence books. So not like the, wacky, let's, go off and have adventures, but like, how do we talk about bullies or loss or, sadness as children, and kind of how to work through all of those emotions. So I hope that answered the question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's really good to know. Heather, if I can ask, is there a reading guide to introduce kids to zombies versus cheerleaders?
Probably not. That'd probably be a steer your kids free of that one. Most of what I've written so far, I would not recommend to children or teenagers. So.
and is that sort of like, have you sort of consciously thought about what you want to write or work on, or is that just something that sort of has come, naturally out of just who you are as a creator?
I think a little bit just who I am, because I am the person that's like watching the scary movies all the time, reading the, Joe Hill, Stephen King books. So that's just where my interest has slid. So when I get really excited talking about new projects, I think they tend to go towards those interests that I'm in. But at the same time, like some of the stuff that hopefully will someday come out is more like fantasy based and doesn't have any of that in there. There's been some really cool like creature fantasy stuff I've been diving into. So maybe in the future I'll have some things that kids can check out.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe I should have asked this earlier, but is anyone here a parent actually, if you're willing to disclose that? Jeff? Okay. So do you have concerns about what your kids are reading or what you give them to? I don't know how old they are. They might be like 20. I don't know.
My daughter is 18 and my son is 16. And my son especially just always loved comics. My daughter reads everything. She'll read the comics if they're around. It's like she really enjoyed Raina Telgemeyer's stuff. Who didn't?
Nice.
I mean, she's the reigning giant in the room, in any room. But my son actually kind of served really well as a test reader. No, it was actually after the books would usually come out, but I could see if like he was reacting to it. And like the first time Meteor Man, the earlier version came out, he was younger than, now he's actually the same age as the protagonist. So it's curious. I want him to read the new version and see how it works on him. Because the only concession I made in thinking of it being a YA book was simply to make the protagonist that age.
Mm-hmm.
I just like, okay, let's consider that the audience might be able to relate to the protagonist a little more, but I don't really think it matters. I think much older readers can get a lot out of it. But I did actually kind of think of in terms of a study guide, like just like what would they do? I wasn't thinking of making one myself, but I was like, what would people do if they were doing a study guide for this? And what I was considering was the fact that you can't pay attention to what characters are saying. You've got to pay attention to what they're doing in a story. At the end of the story, Alden makes a pretty big choice and it throws a lot of people. But if you were paying attention all along, you realize why he made the choice. And that's the kind of thing I would love to see a whole classroom or readers group have to answer that. Like, why do you think Alden did what he did at the end of the story? And I do like that component of, I mean, YA, all that, it's marketing. It's like, it's not really our job. It's the publisher's job Because again, if you don't get the book in front of the right people, it will not get picked up. And we're always struggling with that. That's why everybody's online and we're all trying to like go, woo, look at my thing. But yeah, luckily all I cared about with my kids was not so much what they were reading, but that they were reading, and they read a lot. And so I was happy. I lucked out because I don't feel like I particularly even pushed anything on them.
Yeah.
I read to them a lot when they were little. That's all you can do, I think.
Yeah. No, that's great. Okay, so we've been chatting for about 45 minutes now. And if any of our panelists has anything they want to throw out there for discussion, please feel free. Otherwise, I can put another thing out there, which is since okay, going once, going twice. All right, I'll just thank you all for being here, by the way, and thank you again to the Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries for putting on this event. This is really cool. And it's great talking comics with you all, since most of us aren't getting out of the house and going to Comic-Cons a lot these days, for various reasons, I suppose. So what I was going to ask is, we've talked about, people have worked on their own, projects that they've come up with. People have worked on like licensed stuff. Is there sort of, a dream project that you haven't been able to do yet that is something you would love to do in the future? Either like, a license for an existing franchise, or something that is purely your own idea. And this goes for Michelle as well, something you might love to work on as sort of an editor, publisher role. And I can start by sharing mine, because I've talked about this on Twitter several times at this point. It's like, I would love to write a not a reboot, but more like a sequel to the TV series Quantum Leap. And I have very specific ideas about how I would do that and make it interesting for the 21st century. And that's never going to happen, obviously. But it's like, I might throw it up on AO3 someday. But anyone else, like, is there a dream project out there that, like, has been burning in your soul, that just put it out there in the universe, shoot your shot, see if someone responds. Tony?
I'm working on it right now, because it's when I was younger, it was I need to draw the X-Men, or I need to draw, which, yes, hey Marvel, I would love to draw the X-Men. There's nothing against that, but in the end, it comes down to, I'm an artist. If I want to draw Wolverine, I can draw Wolverine. I can spend an afternoon. I can sell as a commission. I can still make a paycheck off of it. In the end, and there's some great stories I would love to tell in that universe. Mm-hmm. But for me to right now, I'm incredibly lucky to be in a position with among so many things, be able to do my own creator-owned stuff for a property that I love. Not just because it's I'm my own master, I'm working for it. I see the fruits of my own labor, but it's being able to tell that story you want to tell, that I want to tell. And yes, I've worked for everybody. I've worked on a lot of stuff, but in the end, it's having that, be able to put out in the world something you have a strong emotional connection to. And yes, the X-Men as well would be fun, or Star Wars.
Yeah,
but
totally.
it's still that opportunity to do those things. And that, for me, that's what it is. And I just can't express how incredibly lucky I am to have that, everything aligned for me to do that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
I'll jump in after that, because mine too, working on X-Men specifically, someday getting to write Emma Frost is like the ultimate for me, for sure too. Like, that's the dream goal. Creator owned. And then I've always been such a fan of Eli Roth, and seeing him move into so many different realms nowadays with his different TV shows, like working with Eli Roth is the other, like, trying to manifest in the universe in some way.
All right,
Maybe
there
he
you
can
go.
do a comic book and I can be the writer,
Yeah, totally. That's obviously where he's got to go next, right?
Clearly, yeah.
All right. Who else? Who else has a dream?
Curtis, I thought I'd really like to do something where, like, adults have to play like kid games, but if they fail at it, they get killed. I don't know. I don't know if that'd catch on or not.
Yeah, I don't think there's a market for that.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
Well, forget it.
I can't imagine anything like that ever sustaining more than 3 movies.
Spoilers. Haven't seen it yet.
Sloane or Michelle?
I'm trying to think. Some pie in the sky dream project.
Yeah.
I would love to work on an anime. I think that an anime series could be really cool. And then I'm hoping to I really want to write like a sci-fantasy trilogy of prose books, which I'm working on right now. I basically wrote the first one, so I hope that comes to fruition. Could be fun.
Okay, nice. Michelle?
I also want Sloane to work on an anime. That would be rad. I think from a publisher standpoint, I'd love to start doing I'm really big into like murder mysteries and true crime podcasts right now. And by right now, I mean forever. Yep, Heather knows what I'm talking about. So I feel like doing more true crime books would be really interesting. I think it's definitely the time for it now. And also just getting more books by, Asian creators. I'd love to get more like Vietnamese voices, for example, out in the world. I think that would be really awesome. So yeah, true crime and Asian voices. Maybe a little bit of both.
Right. So,
why the heck not?
Right. I'm hearing like Asian American true crime.
Yes.
Which I would also really be interested to see because, like you said,
me and Curtis just worked on something that is exactly that.
Oh, really?
Asians and crime.
Yeah, I mean, not true crime, like we
not
made
true
everything
crime.
up.
Fictional crime.
That's
not with that attitude, Curtis.
This feels like a setup. This whole thing was set up to pitch that property.
No.
I'm on to you.
Yeah, that's Echo Park 2060, which will be coming out from Realm real soon now. But yeah, that's it's like near future, well, in the year 2060, and it's about human clones. So there's a whole murder crime aspect to it, but also a lot of sort of issues of identity, not just around the main character is Asian American, but he's also, spoilers, he has a clone, which is something he finds out in the first episode. So there's a lot of stuff sort of swirling around all that. Yeah, and I'm really happy with what we were able to do on that. So Sloane worked on that. Other authors on that were Jen Reese and Monty Lin and Millie Ho, all of whom have their own works out there, which are awesome. And I was fortunate enough, I was the lead, so I was able to sort of influence who we approached to be on the team. So I think we got a really great group of people together, and we did some really great work, despite having to do it all remotely, over Zoom meetings. Yeah, so that'll be coming out soon, hopefully. Thank you, Amy. Amy just put my website in the chat, so that's fine. You can find me and many other Curtis Chens online. Surprisingly, a large number. Yeah, and yeah. Oh, and my other dream project would be Star Trek. Just putting that out there. Since we're... yeah. And I know. But I'm loving Lower Decks. By the way, it's I feel like after seeing the last episode, which I won't talk about if people haven't caught up yet, but I feel like Mike McMahon kind of got the job because he was doing the TNG season 8 Twitter, right? I mean, he worked on other stuff too, Rick and Morty and whatever. But I feel like he is literally doing TNG Season 8 now. And I'm yes, I'm here for it. Anyway, all right. We've got a few minutes left. Is there anything that we have not talked about that any of our panelists would like to bring up real quick?
Something that popped to mind for me is if you're going to do your own creator-owned thing, get a good editor. Because so many people out there think that they're well, actually, I'm going to take a step. Get a good editor, because sometimes you're too close to it. You don't realize that you're not, what's coming out isn't what you think is actually coming out. And if you can find a good editor for, and it's not just comics, it's prose as well, that you really want someone who's going to catch you on you lying to yourself. Where it's like, I got this great idea. It's like, that's not going to work. And I just can't emphasize, it's something no one for creator-owned stuff ever talks about, but find a good one, ask around, and hire one. Just save up the extra money, count that as part of your budget, and get it, hire an editor for whatever creator-owned thing you're working on. It'll make a huge difference.
Okay, good. So I see Michelle and Heather both nodding at this. So do you have something to add on to that in terms of like, what kind of things should you be looking for if you have not a lot of experience with like hiring a freelance editor?
I don't, it's just, I have taken on editing roles on a few things this year on creator owns, and I totally, even just being in the editor standpoint, I cannot tell people how helpful it is, because I see people that have such great ideas, and it's brought together in these ways that don't quite make sense, and they've written, you know, so much and putting their heart into it, you know, to be like, okay, step back here and explain. So yeah, any kind of writing is a team process, no matter how much you think it's just your thing. Listen to other people, trust them, take the advice, and things will be so much better.
Okay, Michelle, anything to add?
Yeah, I totally agree. An editor is so key. It's like, imagine, you know, that thing you've written and you've read it 1,000 times, you know it by heart, and you're like, this is perfect. This is gonna make a huge difference. And you give it to a friend to read, and they're like, you misspelled kitten or something like that. And you're like, how did I not see it? Because you've read it 1,000 times, you know it by heart. You know, it's instilled in your brain. Giving it to someone with a different perspective, different, you know, life backstories, anything will be able to help you really hone it and make it exactly what Heather said, like something that's amazing. You know it's amazing. You just need that extra guidance. And, you know, we have a great editorial crew at Oni, and we kind of give stories to people when they specialize in either an age range or, you know, genre. And it's not like they're going to dictate what your book is about. You're not going to be like, I want to make a book about, you know, robots, and they'll be like, but what about fairies? You know, they're not going to completely change your book, but they are going to help it, you know, be the best iteration of what it can be.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so we just have a couple minutes left here, I think. Any final thoughts from anyone on creating comics or adapting other work into graphic format?
Have fun with it. That's, in the end, that's silly as it sounds, but I can give you all sorts of scientific explanations of why having fun actually gives you a better product. It relaxes the neural structures. It like different chemical releases. It will actually give you a better product if you approach it with the positive attitude versus the negative attitude. And that's why I said, find, even if it's a paycheck, find something in that property that, oh, I love this character, I love this thing. I'm going to focus emotionally on this. That way I've got that connection. So therefore it's not, I have to draw this. It's, I get to draw this. And it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And a quick side for, like you've mentioned, how to find an editor. If you're in comics already, talk to your editor and see who they tell your editor about the property. And like, do you know anyone who's freelance editing? And can you give me their contact information? And if you don't, find the kind of books of the stuff that you do like, see who edits that, and see if they do freelance. Because sometimes finding a good editor can be difficult. A lot of people, I mean, there are a lot of good editors out there. There's some people who think they're good editors, but it's tough to find that good one. But definitely use those things to ask around, to try to find the person that fits best with their book, and that they'll want to work with you as well.
Yeah, cool.
That's great advice from Tony. Yeah, find the editor who tends to work on things you like, and that's probably who you want to approach. You know, like, people will go up and talk to editors and they talk about themselves, and it's like, why not? How about a refreshing approach where you talk to the editor about what they do? They might like it. It's worth a shot. You know, it's like they have a lot of input, and but yet their job is to also be invisible. They're your first reader. They let you know if again, as he said, if what you're going for is coming across, and sometimes you argue a lot, and it's like, they're not. Sometimes, the position is they're your boss and you got to do it, but when you start pushing back, a good editor will often realize, all right, this is important to the creator. They really want this or whatever, and they won't seem to let go of this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just because they don't want to do changes. Then it kind of, it's sort of a little pressure test to see if, like, well, was this an important thing in the story? And, I've done that before with editors, like, no, I'm not changing this. It's like, this is why this works. And, it's like you have to be able to defend your work a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if you don't have someone helping you in that way, you could be extremely indulgent and end up with something that could be leaner and more succinct, to be nice.
Yeah. Sloane, Michelle, Heather, any final thoughts?
A little unrelated to comics, but I just want to throw out, if anybody is watching this and looking to adopt some kittens, the little X-Men kittens are probably going to be available in a few days or so. So, West Columbia Gorge Humane Society.
Excellent. Very
I was kind of hoping you would plug the kittens.
Yeah.
Throw that out.
Right. So I think we
readers and book fans adopted them all.
Okay. Michelle or Sloane, any closing thoughts real quick? No? All right. Well, I think we need to wrap up for time, but thank you all for being here. This was a great discussion. It's great talking to all of you, hearing you share your stories and your work and your secret dreams.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks again to the library for putting this on. This will be online later. It is recorded. And fvrl.org for all your Vancouver, Washington area library needs. Someone, Amy, do you have
Thanks, Curtis. Thanks
you.
for pushing us. I'll also say that you should look for our authors' books at Vintage Books, a local bookstore here in Vancouver. That's vintage-books.net. And later, starting at 12:30, we have some additional author readings. So please check your Words and Pictures schedule for those. And as Curtis said, this will be on our YouTube channel once we get it fixed up and ready to go and edited a little bit next week sometime. So thank you all for your time, and we really appreciate it. Happy writing, happy drawing, and see you next year maybe.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.